Well, hello and welcome to another Music Ally Focus with me, Music Ally's editor Joe Sparrow. And we have another special guest this week. It's Chris Howard, CEO of the Rattle and a serial entrepreneur. And we chat to him. He has some very enthusiastic ideas about what a disrupted music industry will look like, one that is coming very soon, he thinks. Now, Music Ally provides, as you know, an analysis-rich guide to the music business, and that's what Music Ally Focus does. We'll be talking about one of the most meaningful music business stories, and this podcast will be brief. It should take about the same amount of time as it takes William Lee of Singapore to spin a fidget spinner on his finger. That is 25 minutes and 43 seconds, which he achieved in 2019. Recently, we've published our Q3 report, which looked into music technology startups. Music Ally has already written about over 125 new startups so far this year in 2021. And in that report, we spoke to Chris Howard, as I said, CEO of the Rattle, which operates in London, Los Angeles, and New York City and stands as, quote, a counterculture to the traditional music and startup industries. Now, what Howard said in that report, in particular his critique of the music industry's inability and ability to engage with technology, ruffled a few feathers, so obviously we wanted to hear more from him. And we asked him to expand on what he said in this podcast. He had plenty to say about how the music industry engages or fails to engage with technology, how the music business of tomorrow will look quite different in structure and execution, and how music and an artist may become a facet of the wider social media content creator ecosystem. It's a really interesting conversation coming up right now. By the way, we have previously spoken to Rishi Patel and John Acquaviva of Plus 8 Equity, who we spoke in that report to, and we did a podcast with them recently about the state of music tech startups in 2021. So I recommend, naturally, that you listen to that as well to get a full contextual overview of what's happening in this fascinating space. The link is somewhere around this podcast. So let's go over and talk to Chris. Chris, one of the things you said in the interview we did for you in our quarterly report was, quote, music tech, in your opinion, is really, really, really boring. Now, I know there's a pinch of hyperbole in there, but your point was that you're very excited by things that are not sort of what are traditionally labeled as music tech. You're talking about what you call music adjacent technologies. What we've seen over the last 12 months is this sort of people have been wrenched away from the old duopoly of touring and merchandise and recorded music income. And this third pillar of really exciting income is being discovered. And these are, I think a lot of these are from what you're calling music adjacent technologies. So how do you explain music adjacent technologies? What are they?
Yeah, that's a really, I think it's a really interesting area of tech exploration right now. And first and foremost, I think when I speak about music adjacent technologies, these are often either technologies, digital or physical, or different models that don't necessarily see themselves as having anything to do with music. So those who are making it, may not be aware at all that they are indirectly impacting the music economy. So an example of a music adjacent technology to me is something like a challenger bank. There's a bank in particular I know and love very much called Coconut, which similar to Tide is, as you're using your debit card, you are basically doing your tax return. Like you're collecting your VAT return.
The dream.
And to me, like that is music adjacent technology, because in the shift in how artists are now behaving around their enterprise, they are increasingly becoming business owners, or if not owners, then operators. And the capacity to not have to spend time doing your taxes impacts your capacity to make music. And so music adjacent technologies to me are these areas where you are creating operational models or platform models of which music culture itself will leverage at some future point in time, whether it's through the creation of art or the exploitation.
Where is the line then when we talk about music adjacent technologies? Because we're seeing so much. We Music Ally, I've been reporting on so many different technologies. I find myself we're publishing as much news on Roblox, for instance, as we do on Hypnosis buying up a new catalog of
Yeah, of
music. So will these music adjacent technologies connect initially with the bottom of the music pyramid or the top, the big players?
So in my opinion, most of it's going to happen in the bottom and in the middle, largely due to the speed of adoption. So, the top of the pyramid takes a long time to adopt new things because they have to move so much of their enterprise to leverage something new that just the life cycle of procurement is just so long. But when you're at the bottom of a pyramid and there's millions and millions of you, you have the capacity to test and iterate in ways that large organizations can't. That's not me poo-pooing on large organizations. I think they can do tremendous things. But it's, to answer your question directly, where's the line? I kind of feel that actually that depends upon how you define music or the business of music.
Yeah.
Because if we're using the classic definition, which I understand as the business of music rights, so the exploitation or the reperformance of rights, then technologies which are adjacent to that tend to be those that increase the bottom line, essentially. Any technology which allows you to increase the bottom line in your classic music business, I would consider a music adjacent technology. Whether that's improving the capacity to create better music at a lower price or to manage the affairs of your music business or to a new instrumentation or new kind of ways of identifying talent and opportunities, those are all essentially improving the bottom line. So in that sense, this is what I mean by that technology being boring. It's the same thing. You're just trying to squeeze a little bit extra juice out of the lemon. And these technologies that go, I can make you a marginal gain by having a slightly different sound or a plugin where you pay monthly instead of annually, or you have like another fucking boring gig discovery platform that no one cares about. To me, that's really squeezing a little bit of juice out of the bottom line. To me, is really uninteresting for an economy which is largely, small in and of itself. What's really interesting is if you can take, to me, and this is what I mean by music adjacent, if you can take an artist's enterprise, so the creation of music as a means to carry music culture or some message or some experience or some feeling or whatever, however you describe it. So art communicates culture and music communicates a certain type of culture. If that can be used to influence a different economy, then all of a sudden the technologies in that other economy become music adjacent.
What we see is at the moment, you mentioned this, where we're having huge investment from big either incumbents or new players who are saying, well, we're going to buy, for instance, these catalogs and we're going to use new technologies to make them more efficient and squeeze more out of them. Meanwhile, at the bottom, we're seeing these nimble and cheaper technologies that are newer being adopted very quickly by new artists, for instance, who will perhaps own all their rights and are finding ways to make money from them. As time passes and those artists become bigger, do you think that if they're in control of their careers using this technology, do you think they're less likely to be involved with the existing big players in the current market?
Yeah, it's a really good question. To be honest, I don't know. If you were to ask me with a pure Rattle hat on, I would say, yeah, of course, they're going to ignore the majors, they're going to ignore that system, but that's just not how human psychology works. As a human, you're still drawn to what those in the past determine as successful, because you're being told by those who came before you the way that they did it, and you will have a natural attraction to many of those methods and processes and relationships and whatever. And I think that's going to be fairly magnetic throughout the next generation. So by no means do I even remotely think that the majors or the traditional model is going anywhere. It's not at all. But this isn't disruption in that regard. So I think these artists that are finding new ways to create enterprises, whether it's a manipulation of existing revenue models or just the creation of an entirely new type of company, they will still want a relationship with the existing industry for the legacy impact it has. So no, I don't think there's really going to be a huge swell of people turning around and saying the music industry is dead to me. I want to be an artist, but not in the music business. I don't think that's really going to go anywhere. But the relationship between them will the commercial relationship will fundamentally change. So we're seeing, as you'll know, and many others will know, the explosion of label services versus label deals, largely because access to finance has fundamentally changed for an artist. That the finance a label would normally provide, in some cases, isn't what the artist is looking for anymore. They just want the marketing services and the exploitation network. Labels have transitioned to some degree from a bank with services to just services, and using technologies to optimize those services and so on. So no, I don't think the relationship's really going to disappear. It just commercially will look different, is my opinion.
So a quick reminder at this point that if you're finding this useful and you'd like more of this sort of analytical insight and contextual overview of the music business waiting for you in your inbox every morning, you should head on over to musically.com/subscribe and you can sign up to our industry-leading service. Indie labels, artist managers or publishers might be eligible for one of our sponsored complimentary subscriptions too. All right, let's go back to Chris. And you were quite clear and have been repeatedly that what you call artist-led companies are pointing at where technology is really going. Could you explain what you mean by artist-led companies and why they are particularly interesting to you?
Oh wow, there are so many lenses.
In brief.
Oh dear, which one to start? So, I guess there's a philosophical lens, there is a practical lens, and there's a technology lens, I guess. If from the philosophical lens at first, if you take all of the various industries that exist that have some creative capacity, whether it's chefing, fashion, even education to some degree, it's the creator or the inventor of a new form of IP or art form or method or whatever. The creator, the human that designs a new thing, is often considered the CEO, so to speak, of whatever company is built around it. So you kind of just assume that if I am a chef, I am a chef owner until I declare otherwise, or I go and seek a job. Whereas in the world of music and in things like film to some degree, when you create something, you're not treated as a CEO or owner or leader of your own enterprise. You're seen as somebody who writes music for someone else, even if you are the performer and the brand and whatever. And so philosophically speaking, what I'm really interested in are those artists that go, no, actually, I am the CEO of my own enterprise. And the trickle-down consequences that simple philosophy has throughout the entire value chain of exploiting music is utterly remarkable. Like almost everything changes because you're no longer building a relationship on the rights and royalties that an artist generates, but on the business value.
Can you give an example to help people understand?
Yeah, of course. So classically speaking, if you are an artist, you create an album. Often a label will help you pay for that album to be produced. They will take from the revenue generated, they would take a royalty before you, the artist, get your piece. So you are essentially, it's a loan, arguably speaking. If you're a business owner, the money enters your business first. And so you, as the owner of your business, then choose where to distribute that money. You could choose to partner with a label and pay for some services, or you could do a lot of that stuff in-house and pay an internal team. And so how that impacts your relationship with somebody like a publisher or a label or a manager or whoever else, the commercial relationships are entirely different. And so the infrastructure needs to be entirely different because the infrastructure of music is just a commercial infrastructure. So in terms of artist-led companies, we're interested very much in those businesses that are formed with the artist saying, I am either the CEO or the owner of this enterprise. Now let's exploit what this company creates, which could be commercializing through the traditional model, or you could commercialize in a completely different way by leveraging productization techniques from different industries. So that's the philosophical layer. But then there's the kind of practical layer of an artist-led company, which essentially means that the types of relationships you can build with an artist when they are their own incorporated business are very, very different. So you can, for example, a business can go to a bank and get a business loan, but an artist can't. Or a business can benefit from furlough, an artist can't. A business can go to networking events for other businesses, but an artist can't. And just that simple practical shift of an artist-led company versus an artist looking for a deal fundamentally transforms the relationships and practical nature of how you build your enterprise.
Does that mean that from a fundamental perspective, that for an artist to be considered an artist-led business, that there has to be revenue and money coming in? Can you be an artist-led business even if you're at the stage in your career where money is not coming in?
Yeah, we are about to enter a very deep rabbit hole, so just giving you fair warning. My fundamental belief in the Rattles, one of the Rattles' core fundamental principles, is that a music artist is absolutely no different to any other creator of any other business that exists, period. Like, there is no difference. If I am if I'm making an app and I build a company around my app, that journey should be absolutely no different from a business point of view to an artist that makes an album or a song or whatever else it may be. And just like any early stage app, they don't generate revenue to begin with. At least many don't. Because if you create a product, you have to invest in building the product before you can sell the product.
Yeah.
And so, yes, an artist-led company doesn't necessarily at this early stage need to be revenue generating. It needs to be creating what we call equity value. So, companies are just divided by shares or equity, and that equity appreciates value based upon the activities of the company. That kind of artist-led company approach is creating tons of new adjacent music tech, which is why these two things are interlinked. So we see a huge trend in artists, principally because of the pandemic, being forced to think outside of the music economy for their earning, and as such have now started to become aware of, how did a game studio start up? Making a game isn't really a ton different to making an album from a logistics point of view. And then starting to learn those techniques, and that's what the Rattle's trying to do, is bridge those knowledge gaps, basically.
Right. I mean, it can only be a good thing if artists are thinking in a sort of medium to long-term constructive business sense from an early stage, right? That must be good for everybody.
In our opinion, and to be honest, even for the institutional labels themselves, like, it's a good thing too, because what's happening is that they're building relationships with a new economy, which means that their economy gets bigger. There's these barriers that have been put up through the language and the process of music as a business have locked other economies out of music. And by now having everyone speaking the same language, you can then do deals with people you never thought you'd do deals with. I don't know where this is going to go, but I can imagine a day where, Tesla signs an artist, for example, or does a business partnership with an artist-led company for some reason, shape, or form in the construction or design of new cars. In the Rattle, we've got some really excellent kind of edge case examples of artist-led businesses building their brand in music, but building their company completely elsewhere. We see that, and the technology around all that being really exciting.
One of the things you spoke about was looking into the future, where as the music business, as we know it, is working in a different way, perhaps serving different markets, connecting with people in different ways, whether those are consumers, artists, or creators. You mentioned that you think that a competing business or industry is going to step into that artist and creative space. You suggested it could be the social media industry. And social media industry, of course, is a much bigger concept now than ever. It's not just the platforms we're used to. It can be the metaverse. It can be a bunch of different things as well, which are social media. Is the music business about to become one of online creators' many Lego blocks that they use to create experiences?
That's a really interesting question. So I think the point that I came in with, at least around social media, is the principle of something we call the attention economy, and it is as technology has in the music world has tried to embrace social media. What you're actually doing is you're trying to fight for somebody's attention. You're trying to fight for somebody's screen time, and so on and so on. And these social media companies themselves, TikTok and whatever else, they're also fighting for that attention. You know, not just based upon the creators on their platform, but their proactive kind of curation of certain types of content. And they don't care if it's music or something else. So the music business, if you are an artist or a label or a rights owner trying to exploit social media, you not only need to get someone's attention, you need to tell them to stop looking at something else as well. Because the attention economy is, by most people's estimation, is saturated. Like, we are already spending the maximum amount of time we believe we will ever spend looking at a phone or looking at a screen or looking at whatever else. And so that attention economy is only growing as a function of population, which means you have to steal that attention from something else. And with so many other things fighting for that attention, in my opinion, it's a bit of a losing battle, because it only takes, some person filming themselves cutting a cucumber on TikTok to get 20 million views, when you, as a struggling artist that spent 5 years making a song, gets 10 listens. It's just ridiculous.
Demoralizing.
Yeah, it's totally demoralizing, but it's the nature of the attention economy. Is, if you're trying to fight for attention, it's about being loud and provocative, and just sometimes provocative is strapping a camera to your head and watching yourself looking at trains. It's insane. Like, honestly, there's this guy on Instagram I can't stop following. I can't remember his name, but all he does is like put this 360 camera on his head and just watch trains. And he's so funny. And I wish I didn't find that entertaining, but I do. And while I'm watching that, I am not listening to music. And so it's that paradigm that we have to fight against in social media. So all of these exploitations of social media in the music economy, to me, I also find quite boring. They're not really unlocking anything. And I think social media companies, to your point, are essentially becoming the modern publisher. They're becoming the modern, I wouldn't say label, because they are fundamentally different, but artist development is moving to TikTok, it's moving to Instagram, it's moving to whoever else. And they are slowly but surely ripping many of the functions away from the classic music business, because they command people's attention. Simple as that.
When we look at these waves of social media platforms, let's say, I was speaking about this with Music Ally's Stuart Dredge recently on a previous podcast, and we were saying how, we're seeing a stratification of society based on platforms. So Gen X is on Facebook, perhaps. Millennials are on Instagram. Gen Z, Gen Z are on TikTok, and then the forthcoming generation are probably going to be in metaverse spaces and building things there in Roblox or whatever. And each of these platforms becomes increasingly more about creation of interesting, more fully fleshed out ideas. So do you see that as well as the sort of next? Because in a metaverse type experience, music is one of the things that really makes it come alive, isn't it? And audio. Do you see that it's sort of going to be, music is going to be mainly used in perhaps those environments where it becomes a component, as opposed to, well, I'm going to sit down now and listen to this album experience?
Yeah, that's another really good question. So this is, again, it's just my opinion. The concept of music in the metaverse, again, isn't going to look and feel and smell anything like music, in my opinion, does in a traditional industry, right? As it does now, of the creation of a song, the distribution and publishing of a song, and the exploitation of a song, and so on and so on. It's just going to be fundamentally, wildly different. It is sound for the purposes of altering somebody's mood or behavior. That's where music, in my opinion, is going. And it's in anything, it's more purely art. It is, how do I alter somebody's behavior in the metaverse using sound, as opposed to how do I listen to a song in the metaverse?
Is there a sort of fundamental difference? Is there going to be a sort of differentiation here where we say, okay, this over here is music, and then this over here is emotional sound?
Art, right? Yeah, it is. I genuinely think music is in the metaverse. It becomes the ultimate opportunity for music to get back to how it was in the classical era, which sounds a bit ridiculous, or the jazz era, which is, it's simply an expression of altering somebody's mood through the use of sound. So I want somebody to sit in an audience and feel like they're on another planet. That is classical music to me in a nutshell. And right now, whereas now modern music is often about how do I create a personal identity for somebody to relate with. So you create these kind of icon artists for people of various generations, typically younger, but of any generation really, to say, oh, I'm a bit like them, or I want to be a bit like them. So I'm identifying with the artist more than I am identifying with the music. But I have to enjoy the music in order to identify with the artist. Whereas in the metaverse, none of that really applies. It's how has this sound, how has this art changed my behavior in the metaverse? And so an entirely new breed of music artist or sound artist, in my opinion, will be born from the metaverse. We're a bit early for that. And one of the reasons is just simply the price of, metaverse gear, whether it's a VR headset or, LiDAR capable phones or whatever it may be. Like, those technologies need to kind of enter the classroom kind of price point in order for it to become mass appeal further on. And we're still a little bit away. So the sound as art in the metaverse, I think we're still 5 to maybe 10 years away. But I genuinely do agree with what you're saying. The stratosphere change of all these various platforms will start to segregate people's consumption habits around music and film or whatever. If I consume music traditionally, I'm probably going to be on Facebook. If I consume music as a way to alter my mood, I've probably got an Oculus Quest. Therefore, whatever Facebook Arena, I think it's called, or there's a new metaverse product from Facebook, which, forgive me if it's not the right name, which will become this kind of artistic space. And so there are tech companies like Patch, for example, XR, making metaverse soundscape tools. So a digital audio workstation in the metaverse, so that sound artists can create interactive metaverse soundscapes for anything. Like, they can put it into a game, they can put it into Minecraft, they can put it anywhere they want. But it's early signs of these technologies allowing sound artists to build for the metaverse. But it's a completely different psychology to music as a brand identity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think seeing as we've strayed that far into philosophy, maybe a good place to leave it. Chris Howard of the Rattle, thank you very much.
I'm so sorry. I tried to get practical, but it's really hard.
So if you found that useful, please share it on with someone else who you think would be interested. And if you found it controversial, please email me. That's joe@musically.com and let me know what you think. We also have a free weekly email called The Knowledge, which rounds up bits of the best analysis, news, insight and skills from Music Ally. So sign up and make your life just that little bit better. Links are in the description as always. And that's it from me, Joe Sparrow, Music Ally's editor. Until next time, farewell.